because that's my problem. All right. Hello, I'm Dustin Seaton, the Gifted and Talented Specialist at the Northwest Arkansas Education Service Cooperative and President of Arkansans for Gifted and Talented Education, or better known as AGATE. AGATE is an organization that encourages the development and implementation of educational programs and initiatives throughout Arkansas, especially when it comes to serving and identifying gifted and talented youth of Arkansas. You can check out our new website for more information at giftedarkansas.org, and we encourage you to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Being part of an AGATE, you get access to webinars such as this one tonight, sponsored by our newly formed Enrichment Committee. Tonight's webinar is entitled Gifted in Arkansas, a Student Panel Perspective. Our panelists include current and former GT students in Arkansas, as well as now former Arkansas Governor School alumni from across the state. And they volunteered after I asked them and asked Devin to help me with doing that, to share their GT experiences, as well as offer some advice for things that we could do to improve our gifted programming, as well as in student engagement, especially during times of virtual learning. So I don't know if all of y'all knew this, but this summer, Arkansas Tech University hosted the first ever virtual governor school, which most of our panelists have participated in. I first met them at Arkansas Governor School Educator Day, where they were on a student panel and answered questions from educators about AGS and their AGS experience. And it made me wonder, why are we not doing this more often and asking our key stakeholders in gifted education, our students, what we can do to continually grow and improve our gifted programming. So here we are. And I hope to learn a lot from these young individuals, and I hope you do too. I encourage you to sit back and listen from wherever you are tonight, but feel free and comfortable to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can ask questions to our panelists. The chat box is also available if you would like to make comments, but it's mainly for sharing resources, links, or other type of comments. Don't worry if you have to leave. We are going to record this, and we are Facebook Living this, and we'll be posting it on our website, giftedarkansas.org. So with that said, let's get started. Listen to our key stakeholders here. Most of y'all are now 3 weeks into your senior year, but we'd love for you to kind of describe your journey and reflect on your experience in gifted ed. So I'm going to throw that out there to see if there's anybody that'd like to start first.
I can go ahead and start us off.
Sure.
So my name's Devin. I entered into the Gifted and Talented program pretty much right when it started, first or second grade. And I was in it up until 8th grade when it ends in my district. I was always super involved with the GT program. I really enjoyed a lot of the extra stuff that they taught me and allowed me to experience. And it definitely kept me thinking in ways that I wouldn't have done if I wasn't in the program. And then as a high school student, I have been in AP classes every year. And I'm on a college path, so applying to college right now, and yeah.
Anybody else?
Go ahead. All right, so my name is Nick. I was identified for the gifted program in I believe it was my second grade year that they tested me and identified me, and then our program starts in 3rd grade at my school. So I've been in it since 3rd grade. It was kind of a surprising thing for my family, honestly, because educational excellence and just academic achievement isn't really a thing for my family for a long time. My grandparents at most got a 6th grade education. My parents graduated high school, but there's not a single college graduate in my family. So whenever I got identified into the gifted program, it was kind of a big deal for my family. And it really helped me just kind of unleash my potential. I knew I was a smart student as a kid. I read from a very young age, and then that program just kind of continued to foster it. I really benefited from gifted education as a child. Like in elementary and intermediate school, like I can't stress enough like how much this program just let me thrive more than I would have in a traditional education setting. In middle school, I feel like my GT program definitely benefited me in my younger years a lot more, but as I got into older years, the whole academic factors and just academic aspects of the GT program were replaced by pre-AP programs in middle school and then now AP classes. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Bryson, Roy, do y'all want to add anything?
So um, I went to a magnet school for the first 6 years of my education. So kindergarten through fifth grade, and it was a science and math school, and that's kind of why those became my strong suits for a very long time. And our our kindergarten teacher did something different from the curriculum that a lot of our teachers weren't doing, is that she had us reading every night, and uh, she expected a lot of us, but that really helped prepare us because a majority of her class then went into first grade very well prepared, and uh, was the first wave to test into the GT program. And for the first 2 years, so first and second grade, we were tested and then retested um, to kind of continue to qualify for the program. And they would pull us out of class on designated days, and we would do uh, more challenging work. I guess that's what they were doing. And then it changed in third grade. We went to a designated teacher and did different activities for an hour out of normal instruction, and that kind of continued to progress until I went to a public charter school. So I went to Lisa Academy in West Little Rock, and so I can really speak to more so how the GT system works in charter schools. And there, it really decided what classes we were in. So from sixth grade to 10th grade, our courses and what we could do and what we could take was basically dependent upon whether we were in the program. And then in the program, we would take different field trips and have conversations ranging anywhere from politics to the meaning behind mathematics and stuff like that. And we would get involved in programs that would we wrote letters to children in Syria. Now, kind of when that was kind of bustling and a really big deal, and it kind of slowed more in 9th and 10th grade for me. I went to the same school, but in a weird way, our middle school and high school, which were on the same campus, started to fight and became separate schools, kind of. And so we didn't get a GT coordinator for our high school. So I think one of the shared experience I have with Devin and Nick is that it was really formative in the beginning, but it started to trail off until now.
Yeah, thanks, Bryson. Roy, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, I can. So I feel like I'm having to think back here. Unlike the rest of the students here, I'm going into my senior year of college rather than high school. So my time in Arkansas GT programs is a little further behind me. But I think, in many ways, my kind of journey with it and experience followed a lot of the same patterns. Interestingly enough, at Prairie Grove, where I went to school, we actually had GT starting in kindergarten. But for kindergarten, first and second grade, it was a program for all students. And we would go to it, once or twice a week, the same way we would go to music class, the same way we go to art class. And mostly what I remember from that is like making bouncy balls out of laundry cleaning products, which for me as like a first grader was very exciting. But then, yeah, starting in third grade, it was more of an identified program. And then similar to the experiences of everyone here, I think it, was kind of most definitely a kind of serious entity up until 8th grade. And then in high school, yeah, it was definitely kind of supplanted by AP classes and other opportunities like that. I think one, interesting experience that I had, especially coming from a very small school district, was that the tone of the GT program in a lot of ways really did depend very much on the GT coordinator. So in my time in GT in Prairie Grove, we had 3 different coordinators, and it was a vastly different experience with kind of vastly different expectations of what actually occurred in GT class for each of those, going from kind of, it was free for all playtime and you could, like just make up things on a piece of paper and just kind of kill an hour, or to like having later on kind of a more serious curriculum that was actually kind of developed out, and there was, you know, felt to be a little more of a purpose as to what we were doing. And so I think that, you know, was kind of something that was very informative for me, is that it really was just driven by whatever one individual was in charge of that GT program, which could be really great if that individual had a lot of time and a lot of passion to put into it, but also could, you know, kind of be, it could easily be forgotten. You know, there wasn't a kind of large accountability network making sure that there was any kind of quality instruction going on. It was, you know, we all went to a little like side building that was full of skunks and cats and things, and whatever happened in there stayed in there for the most part. But it was certainly a very formative thing for me, and very, you know, like just kind of really influenced a lot of the way that I thought about school, and provided a lot of my kind of favorite memories from my time, especially middle school. And I think that's very similar to what everybody else stated.
So I'm curious, like Devin, you said you felt like GT ended in 8th grade. Do all of y'all feel like it kind of tapered off?
Mine literally ended at 8th grade. Like, we don't do any GT stuff anymore. We do like, so my year, I don't think they do this anymore. We went to Epcot, Disney World, and then after that, we did a couple projects, and then it's over. They still send us, like, at the beginning of the year, ACT and SAT dates and AP classes you might be good for. But I haven't had any contact with the GT program since 8th grade.
Is that similar to the others? Y'all feel like GT ended at a certain spot?
My school,
yeah, it did kind
go
of
ahead.
end. Sorry. Yeah, it did kind of end in 8th grade for me, because our coordinator stayed in the middle school, and we didn't really have a GT coordinator for the high school. And it, like, our meetings went from once or twice a week down to once a month. And that was like, kind of like Roy said, that was only if she remembered. And it wasn't that she didn't care, because she would send us emails about scholarships and different things that obviously she wanted to connect with us. But there was just so much going on, and she was also carrying multiple job titles. That was kind of like, we need a person that this is their job, and this is the only thing that they have to worry about, because it is a lot to deal with when you're at a school that's supposed to be high performing, and then you're dealing with an extra GT program.
Yeah, I completely agree with most of the things everyone said so far. My GT program does technically continue throughout high school, but I believe at our school we have 2 GT coordinators. We have a kindergarten through 6th grade coordinator, and then we have our kindergarten through 5th, and then 6th grade through 12th grade coordinator. And our 6th through 12th coordinator is, like Bryson said, preoccupied with other different job titles. They have different responsibilities that it seems like in GT these other job titles are taking priority over the GT program. So technically we're supposed to have a meeting once a week, but we haven't had a single meeting this year with our GT coordinator. And that's kind of been a pretty similar thing for the entire year, because I've noticed in high school programs, they use AP classes almost as kind of excuse to not have to have any supplemental work for kids in the GT program. And also just on that whole thing where my coordinator is in 6th through 12th, it seems like all of her focus mainly goes into the middle school programs. And yeah, I haven't really had much involvement in anything GT related besides an occasional field trip and occasional fundraising for that field trip. So yeah, I agree with what everyone else has said here.
So in an ideal scenario, what would y'all like a secondary, like a 712 GT program to look like? What could we do to better serve the needs in the secondary setting?
For me, honestly, the program ending at 8th grade felt correct, because that's just how it's been done in my district for a long time. But I do think that there is an issue with GT students specifically going into high school. I think that there's a really weird spot where GT kids don't know how to take notes or study or like do anything. And we're pushed into these AP classes because we are gifted and talented students. We should be like performing academically. And so if anything were to happen in the high school level of GT, I feel like showing kids how to adapt to like really having to work hard is really important, because I never got that, and I struggled starting high school to figure out how to study, because I never had to study before, because I was literally missing class to go do research on like cemeteries and stuff. So I didn't have any experience with that. And then because of that, a lot of GT kids end up blaming themselves, and it becomes a mental health issue, and like severe fear of failure, but not knowing how to cope with it and not knowing how to move on. So I feel like if anything, just throughout high school, teaching kids to prioritize, one, their mental health, and two, how to adapt to real work and really like getting stuff done.
I completely agree with that, because I think grit and perseverance is something that definitely needs to be stressed in GT programs, because if you just looked at the term gifted and talented, inherently it has this privileged sort of vibe to it. I feel like as a kid, we are basically bestowed this kind of title upon us where it's like, you are gifted, you are succeeding better academically and creatively than above average in your class. And we get this sort of entitlement, this academic and just entitlement all around, that we believe that we're entitled to good grades, we're entitled to not really have to work for the privileges we get through this program. Because we were given it at a young age. We don't really, in a third grade level, we don't understand how beneficial and how fortunate we are to have been awarded this privilege, because most kids don't get this academic push. They don't get this potential fostered out of them, but like we received that. And because we got it at such a young age, we didn't really understand the full ramifications of that. So as we're going into older grades, we're just approaching our education with this entitledness, with this privilegedness. So whenever we get into a high school setting where we're in an AP class where something we have to actually work for, we just kind of fall short.
That's interesting, because I was gonna follow up. Does the gifted label carry a lot of weight in your community? As you pointed out, it often gets associated with privilege or status, but I didn't know if it's equitable across the state, that the term gifted and talented.
It definitely sets up a hierarchy, which is natural, especially for grade school kids or just people in general. But especially at my old school, there were 3 separate graduation tracks that basically determined how much credit you graduated with. Not really what colleges you got into, but you had the kind of the regular track, scholars, and then honors. And they tested if you had the right test scores and you were in GT, then you were in that top group, you were in the honors group. And what they did with especially my honors class, is they treated us as like guinea pigs. So we'd be put into the experimental classes and the experimental courses, and we were given the choice to take as many APs as we wanted from a schedule. And so it kind of, you separate kids, and then it's not like the honors kids get any more, the honor students get any more tutoring, or they get better instructors. They just get different course material. And so it feels like there's a hierarchy you set up, but then there's really no follow through. You just separate the kids and you say, this is what classes you take.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it carries a lot of weight where I am. For students specifically, especially younger ones, if you don't get into the program and you're like, there are kids getting pulled out from class every week, there's definitely kind of a rift that forms there. Because I know I had friends who weren't in the program and wanted to be in the program, and my younger sister performs about the same academically as I do, but was never put into the program. She was tested and not placed, and so it was like, it even creates like a little bit of a rift there in like mental expectations for both of us. So the term definitely has some weight, and probably I would say more negative connotations than positive ones.
You want to elaborate on that at all?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think people, it's negative in the sense of people don't feel good saying it. Like me, like calling myself gifted feels elitist, and it feels, it's like a very privileged term, because I am very aware that if it weren't for the gifted program, I would not be as gifted of a student, and that there are a lot of other students that, if they had gone through this same program, would probably be in the same place that I am right now. And I think when people think of the GT program, they think of elitism, and they think of upper middle class white kids in a classroom being pulled out to do extra work that a lot of other students aren't able to do.
And Roy, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I think both this story and what Bryson was saying highlights what to me is kind of the most fundamental concern I have about gifted and talented education, particularly gifted and talented education in Arkansas, is that it's become misconstrued as this kind of a push and of a, we're going to make you work harder academically, and because you are academically more successful, then you are going to have to kind of, you know, do this. I really do think it's viewed as this like academically elite thing. But I think Devin highlighted a really good point where you know, you said that your sister actually performs very similarly academically to you, but wasn't highlighted, wasn't identified as GT. And I think that's key, because gifted and talented at least should be not strictly about academic success. It represents something about both the way you learn and the way you interact socially and emotionally with material and with other students. And so I think this idea, both from the outside and it's often kind of practiced by GT educators, that it's this, you know, we're going to make you do these extra projects and make you work hard. While that can be great to provide that other opportunity, I think what's more important is actually using GT time as an opportunity to support the kind of very complicated socio-emotional needs of gifted students, where they actually might have a lot of trouble in their regular classroom and might have trouble interacting with their peers, or being able to kind of, like was mentioned, cope with studying skills and things like that, which that's kind of more important to me than like, oh, well, we're going to learn about, you know, cover this course material, because there, as has been pointed out here, there is plenty of AP and pre-AP options that kind of provide that advanced course material. But I think the socio-emotional support for gifted students is something that never exists as much as it should, and is certainly almost completely phased out by high school. But for me, like the relationships that I had with my GT teachers and the ability to go to somebody and be like, I just don't feel well about like how school's going, or like my classes are like really frustrating me, or this teacher's getting whatever. It's like, that was a very beneficial component of it, more so than any particular curriculum or module or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I spent my like elementary school years telling people this isn't like, it's not an academic thing. It's like these are the kids who like are so like in another world in class, they like can't focus because they just don't care at this point, because they want to think about other things, and like they need something else to do. And so I like, that's something that I explained to people for so long, and eventually just got tired of like dealing with it.
That's very much what it was, because I have vivid memories of elementary, but you know, being one of the first ones done with the test, and then you know, you are now the person that gets to grade everyone else's tests, which there's problems there, but you know, it was very fun. But we really used GT as a time for thought exercises. Like, it was always there were always very mature conversations going on. I remember my GT teacher, I don't know if she'll ever see this, but her name was Karen Banks from Carver Elementary, but I love that woman to death. But my favorite time would be when we would talk about hurricane season, because we would go through, you know, these are the different strengths of hurricanes. This is what they can do. Now let's talk about the socioeconomic impacts. Now let's talk about the political impacts. Now let's talk about, you know, just breaking problems down piece by piece. And then, you know, right before we go to class, it's like, let's do Sudoku as a class. And so that was kind of what we did. And she would always tell us, you know, whether we were doing riddles or whatever, nothing is ever hard, it's challenging. don't say something is hard, because then that gives you permission to give up. And so it's things like that, the guidance that's more more key with gifted and talented instruction. And it's less of, because you have kids that can basically teach themselves the curriculum of their regular class, but it's that they need to be stimulated in other areas of their intellectual capacity, social capacity, emotional capacity that matters.
We got one of our first questions in the Q&A from an attendee. GT is K-12, but there is a transition typically around 8th grade, 9th grade from a traditional pull-out GT to like a pre-AP or an AP program. Do you think your educational career would be enhanced if a secondary GT person were there for you? And I want to follow up with that, because also we hear GT teachers say, we want to be at the high school, but y'all's schedule is so jam-packed with coursework that y'all don't have time for GT and don't want to go to GT. So I was going to give y'all a chance to kind of respond to that.
I do not think I would want GT in the same format that I had it through 8th grade. I think that I would be very peeved if I was pulled out of my AP classes to go do GT work. However, I think that having someone who could help me with applying to college, figuring out like standardized testing and all of that kind of stuff, just someone to talk to and consult with, because I don't really have that. Like, my parents went to college, but they both went to college at University of Arkansas. And so we have very different paths that we're looking to go on, and I have nowhere to go for that. And so everything I get is from my peers. So like, I was in AGS group chats learning about college applications for the first time this summer and how to do everything. And so if GT existed in the like 9 through 12 area, I think continuing it in the way that it happens in middle and elementary school would harm students and their academic performance and their opinions on the program. But if it was integrated into the AP classes, into learning how to study, into finding the best resources like Quizlet stuff, or like just developing your studying skills and your skills as a student, I think that could be helpful.
I completely agree with that. Guidance, like as many people have already mentioned, just guidance should be the primary focus of high school GT program. I have a slightly different perspective, because just the regular classes in my high school are honestly just not great. I go to a relatively poor school. We're a growing city, and we're like growing, and we just got a new high school, but like still our poverty level is insanely low. Our students on free and reduced lunch, I think, is at 70%. And our literacy rate as a community is at the 3rd grade level. So as a result of that, you see our school not getting funded as much. Our teachers aren't getting paid as much. So our classes are just relatively lower than, say, somewhere like Fayetteville or ASMSA. So I do feel like in certain aspects, I'm not getting my educational needs met even in a pre-AP class, because we don't have the retention rate for teachers. We see teachers coming in, they're getting paid $30,000 a year, and then they leave after a year for a higher paying job. So we're not getting experienced teachers, and therefore we're not getting like a full education. So at some points, I think in my 9th and 10th grade year, I would have maybe even benefited from a pull-out sort of GT situation, not to the same extent that elementary was with pulling out every week or pulling out once a day, but I think some kind of educational just stimulation in addition to the AP classes would have really helped. But yeah, I do agree as well with, instead of just focusing on those academic aspects of the GT program, you should focus more on how to help these students progress, because as a GT student, you're kind of expected to be college bound most of the time. You know, there are obvious exceptions, and there's different paths that many GT students want to go. But for the most part, most GT students set college as their next phase in their lifetime. And I think that programs could have a great impact on that. Because like with me, I don't have anybody in my family to go to for guidance, because none of them ever went to college. None of them were ever academically successful. So I don't have any guidance in that regard. So I think that something such as that would definitely benefit me for my future.
Yeah, we literally, my school district got rid of their college guidance counselor. We had a counselor specifically to help students apply to college and figure that out, and they removed the position. So that was nice.
Yeah. At ASMSA, we actually have an office set aside just for that. So we have our student success coordinators, and we're kind of in a transition period now because one of them is online and one of them quit like 1 week before school. And so we basically have one person on campus that people can go to, and they don't really have time to fulfill their requirements right now. And it's unfortunate because same as Devin, I'm having to, rely on my seniors that graduated last year to be like, hey, here are the scholarships you should apply for, and here's how to get this financial aid or whatever. And at my old school, we actually had our GT program kind of shifted into this thing called CRLP, which was our college readiness and leadership program. And throughout the year, so you had 2 first semester, 2 last semester, like $250 a piece, and then the summer program was about $1,000, I think. And we would do ACT practice there in college readiness, but a lot of our college counselor, we had a college counselor assigned to us, and they would sit you down and say, these are your college options, apply to these. And it really wasn't like an open-ended discussion or anything. It was, go to these colleges and we'll help you.
There's another Q&A chat from the attendee. Would it be beneficial to have a GT teacher teaching some of an academic course? And to kind of piggyback off that in the chat, or what about if we could do it once or twice a month during lunch with the GT teacher? What would be a better way to engage with you that's not encroaching on your limited availability?
I think in some ways it's important to think about GT at the secondary level in a very different way. And I think this is an interesting panel because in some ways we already have an example of a gifted program that works incredibly well for students in Arkansas, that being Arkansas Governor's School. And I think a really key point here that kind of maybe was unintentionally brought up is that one of the greatest resources, I think, from any GT program is beyond just the resources of the program and of the teacher and the facilitator and all of this, is the community in that program. And I know you guys were saying, and I know I had the exact same experience, that like I learned how to apply to college and, kind of be a person and kind of go about these steps through my senior year with like the people and the friends that I made at Governor's School. And one thing I know that at least for me was beneficial about my middle school GT program as well was that we would go to events and competitions and things like that with other local schools or other schools across the state, where I would make connections and make friends with gifted students who then could kind of support me and be a part of that community. And so I think it is certainly true that high school students, especially many of the districts in the state, if not everyone, because I certainly relate to that as well, have a very busy schedule, a very heavy course load, and are, trying to work on becoming the best applicant they can for college and things like that. And so I think with that in mind, it is important to frame this discussion on what's going to be the most helpful for students and think about it not in trying to kind of recreate something that worked well at one point, but to identify the targets that are most valuable, like that sense of community, like that socio-emotional support, and find the kind of most effective way and the most efficient way to bring that into students' lives. And I think like one of the reasons why it's not necessarily so helpful to bring in kind of an 8th grade program to the same way is I think in some ways reflective of what happens in a lot of 8th grade programs, and that they're, fun and exciting and you learn interesting things, but that they might not be meeting enough of those like socio-emotional needs where that's actually what really should be transferred into high school. And so bringing that same kind of academic rigor although, like I said, like I totally get that I would have appreciated maybe more academic rigor at my freshman and sophomore year, but it isn't necessarily the kind of primary target.
One thing I kind of want to talk about based off of that and kind of other stuff people have been saying, the GT program is completely different depending on where you are, which I'm not saying that the whole program should be standardized, because I think that would also be a bad idea, because I think you're supposed to be fitting individual students and districts' needs. But the amount of variation based on where you are is crazy. Like I don't know who my GT coordinators were. I really have no idea. But I studied a bunch of different topics all the way up through 8th grade. And then we went to Disney World for a week, which is like such a weird, a wonderful thing. Don't get me wrong. It was very exciting. We like rode on Space Mountain with the lights on and like to study physics or something, study physics. And it was so cool. But that's not offered anywhere else. It's a very different experience depending on where you are and depending on the funding where you are and just the opportunities. And so it's a very different experience for everyone. And we all just like, nobody knows what's going on. And I feel like that's a little bit of a problem, because if you don't have any standardization, you run into a couple issues.
Did that come up more apparent at Governor's School?
I'm not sure if it specifically became apparent at Governor's School, but I think talking to other kids and realizing like, oh, Nick, your GT program is supposed to meet in high school. Ours, like, they tell us it ends at 8th grade. Like it doesn't exist for us past then. So just knowing that there was variation beyond that was kind of crazy. Because I always assumed it was like we studied the brain one year. I assumed everyone studied the brain. We did a huge bird unit. Like I assumed just every GT program did that. But we visited cemeteries once. We just went to every cemetery in our state, not in our state, in our town. But like just random stuff. I don't know.
Nick,
yeah,
Bryson, do y'all have a comment on that?
It became more apparent at AGS, but I mean, coming here to ASMSA last year, I met people from across the state, and so we definitely talked about, because a lot of the kids here were in the GT program, and it definitely seemed like it was from Cabot to Little Rock to Benton, or whatever. It was very different ideas of what gifted and talented meant, what it was called, and kind of what they did in class. Because sometimes it sounds a lot more like it's more coursework, and other times it's just different programs that we're preparing kids for college and trying to make students into better students in a sense. So AGS was really, because I met more people, but yeah, I knew about some inequities, but also just fundamental differences across programs.
Yeah, I just feel like if you're gonna have one program that's all under one name, and almost all of the decisions are completely different under every coordinator, there's almost no purpose of having it under one name, because then it's essentially like just a different program for higher level students that the schools get to decide. So why isn't it just a class that people can opt into? So if you're going to have this program that has a test that every district has to give, is the test also like a standardized set of things? Is it different varying on district, and like all of that kind of stuff?
So let me ask the $1 million question then. What did you really like about your GT experience, and what can we do better now that you're reflecting on your journey?
In my experience with GT, I do feel like it had many positive effects on me. Just first of all, the fact that a program identified something in me and put this belief in me and invested money, resources, extra material, extra classes in me, that is something that honestly could have very well impacted the very course of my life. I'm really grateful for just like all that instilled in me. It taught me a lot how to think in different ways. Because a lot of it wasn't exactly like coursework. Well, there were some units where it's like, oh, let's learn about bones or let's learn about teeth. And we'd have that kind of academic stuff. But the main focus of it was teaching us how to think. And I feel like that was a really beneficial thing for me as a student. On the same token, though, there are some pretty glaring flaws that I have noticed in a lot of GT programs, and which just, it's not a very diverse program in general. I mean, I don't think that's a secret to anybody. There's massive inequities within the program. If you just look at my school in general, like I'm just looking at my school, I don't know the complete demographics, but I'm sure it's reflective in some ways. But we have a very high Hispanic population and we have a pretty significant Marshallese population, but our GT program is almost entirely white. And at that, it's not only the racial diversity that's lacking, it's also the economic diversity. We're an extremely poor community, but the type of kids that you're seeing in these GT programs, they are the upper middle class ones. They're the ones whose families are business owners in the town. So you're not really seeing a full representation there. And one thing I felt like my entire GT experience was lacking was just attention to differing perspectives, because I feel like after a while you are growing up with these same kids, and in many cases the same group of just white kids from similar backgrounds. You're not hearing this like myriad of experiences, this myriad of just different perspectives on just everything in general, and that honestly really takes away from a lot of things. AGS was probably one of my first experiences in really like just hearing diverse perspectives, hearing from people from just all different walks of life, because that was my school, my GT program. The people I'm in AP classes with, they all come from relatively the same background. And I think that GT could play a huge part in just teaching us how to be cognizant of different perspectives, just teach us how to really just expand our horizons, be able to listen to differing voices, be able to break out of this just echo chamber that we get in our own minds from the voices we keep hearing over. And that's why I just think promoting diversity in GT programs is just integral. That's what the main focus should be of the GT program going forward. So
yeah,
my take.
I 100% agree with that. So I, going through the program, had a wonderful experience personally. Most of the time I was learning things, I was engaged. It gave me something else to think about. It put me on an AP path. And I met a lot of cool people, a lot of cool teachers. But out of my entire grade of GT students, and I think we're a school district of like 10,000 people, but my class has 600, something like that, one Black person in the entire GT class for my grade level, which is a problem. Mm-hmm. And it's a large problem. It's one person of color. And seeing that, and I've talked to her a lot about the GT program, and how, she was like, I didn't expect it as a kid to just be me there. And so there are a lot of issues with racial diversity and socioeconomic diversity. There's one story I want to highlight from that I heard at AGS from a student, and she was talking and she said, yeah, when I went into school in elementary school, we were super poor. My family was super poor. I didn't have a lot of resources. I didn't perform well in school. And then I got adopted by my aunt and uncle. So she got adopted, she moved, and her aunt and uncle were upper middle class, and her grades immediately shot up. She was immediately put into the GT program where she moved. Like every single thing changed for her with that one shift, which is something that's really interesting to look at, because as soon as she was able to be pushed like that into the GT program, she did it, and she raised her grades, and she went to AGS, she's in AP classes. And so like, you know that there's potential in lower socioeconomic groups and in other people besides white people, and it's not being seen anywhere.
Absolutely. Bryson, Roy, you want to add to that?
I have a bit of a different experience. As far as I grew up in Little Rock, which is very diverse, especially for Arkansas. It's just minorities tend to group in large cities. But even in that, um, being in very diverse GT programs with people from all over, it was still that economic disparity was still there. I grew up and I've had a transition over my life of going from lower middle class to upper middle class, and so my mom, to her credit, has kept me at a very steady pace. Of course, I'm getting better, but she never allowed, my mom and my grandmother never allowed what our situation was to hold me back. They were always very invested in my education because they wanted me to succeed, and they knew I would have the opportunity if they, invested their time. But it's also something that should be systemic, in a sense that our nation and our officials should want every student to succeed at the same level, because then you have a productive society. And so I think if states and school districts focused more on uplifting all students, but taking the GT program and improving it and kind of not standardizing it, but making it so that if you're in GT in this school, then we are to some extent on the same page. I think that would greatly benefit all students, because my experience might not have been bad, but I'm not a person that can speak for everyone who's had problems with it, and that's just, it'd be better if it was more diverse, but it'd also be better if there was more of a focus on making better students than taking the students that are already naturally smart and just setting them aside to continue to excel.
I think that for me raises like a very fundamental question about what the point of a GT program is. And I think across the state, we certainly see huge issues with who is identified as GT. We also see a wide variety of who is identified at GT, because it is fundamentally something decided at the school level within certain legal standards. But I do think that as speaking to GT educators here and GT coordinators, a real focus has to be on identifying the right students for GT. And I think for me, the right students for GT are not necessarily those who are, exactly like who are already smart, we're going to be fine, and now can be smarter because, or do better because they're in GT. In my view, I think actually the students who are in GT are the students who would not be fine without it. The data shows that there's large amounts of gifted individuals in prison, and cause trouble at school and who are neglected. And those are the students who I think GT really primarily needs to serve, is not those who are going to be kind of fine either way, but this is like a fun extra thing, but it's those who, this is a real need for them. And they have to have this need met, or they won't be able to perform well in their regular classes. They won't be able to continue on a kind of regular path of socio-emotional development, and won't be able to succeed, not just academically, but as a human being. And I think we both, we have to have a real conversation about how we identify students, because I don't think it ever is about just identifying the students who are going to be academically successful. It's somehow working on identifying the students who are going to have these needs. And of course, those students are distributed among all income classes and among all races. And if we can make sure we are doing the best job we can identifying the students who really need these programs, then that in itself will address these inequities. Because if you are identifying fairly and equitably, everything it'll be even out, and it'll be right there.
It is interesting that y'all are aware of this as an issue, and I can tell you from an educator side, we are aware of this as well, and we're trying to address it. Devin, you said something at Governor's School that I thought was interesting. One of the programs that your high school is doing to help identify and encourage students of color to take more rigorous and academic courses. Would you mind elaborating on that for our viewers?
Yeah, totally. So it's a class that my school labels AP ambassadors, and my advisory teacher started it. So the goal of the class is to talk to students. Our school district, we have one school that a lot more kids from this school end up in AP and pre-AP classes than our other junior high school. And so our focus in this AP ambassadors class is to talk to the kids who would not be going into AP classes and pre-AP classes simply because they haven't been told that they have the potential for that. And so the goal is to increase the diversity in our programs, because that there are lots of students of color who are extremely smart and capable and would thrive in a hyper academic environment, and they could do amazing things with that. And they just aren't being encouraged in the way that they should be encouraged, whether that's by their teachers because of unconscious biases or conscious biases, or if that's from their family, if that's from their peers. But it's something that my school district wanted to address and that my teachers wanted to address, because we see it and we're very aware of the lack of people of color in our AP classes, and we want to fix it. And so we focus on learning about our biases, learning about what are the disparities, helping students who are first-time AP class takers, people who are just taking classes for the first time. Usually, I don't know if we get to do this year because of COVID, we'll go to the junior highs and talk to kids and be like, hey, these are options. You have all of these cool things that you can do academically. You have these agriculture classes that you can go through, and you can make a career out of that. There are all of these paths that you can take that you're just not encouraged to take. So that's the whole goal of the class, which is pretty cool. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, we're always looking for strategies and ideas that we can do to close that equity gap. Do any of our other panelists have suggestions, ideas? And granted, it's not your responsibility, but we want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think a big issue with the equity problem in GT is just teaching GT coordinators how to be culturally cognizant of the needs of all their students. So I am half Hispanic. My mom is full Hispanic. She's an immigrant. Spanish was her first language. And just, I've talked to her, I've had a lot of discussions with her about just growing up Latino and just figuring out how to navigate that. And there are just certain things that you need to take into consideration that you wouldn't take into consideration with a white kid. For example, you're going to look, I'm trying to rephrase. I have so many thoughts in my mind, but one issue that I think we need to tackle is we need to identify more kids we need to look into ESL programs. I think that is something where there's so much untapped potential, because these kids are learning a new language at the same time as trying to just advance their normal social development as a kid. That's impressive. That's takes a lot of mental energy. That takes a lot of mental intelligence to be able to do things like that. But for the most part, whenever we're identifying gifted programs at these young age, ESL students are still trying to get a grasp on their reality, still trying to get a grasp on how they fit into the picture, especially in communities, white communities in Arkansas. They're trying to navigate their own identity and culture. And that causes a lot of Hispanic students to be more quiet in classes. They're not going to speak up as much, so they're not going to be identified as much by gifted coordinators and placed in those programs. And that is something I just think across the board, we need to just be more culturally sensitive, understanding. We need to probe more into diverse students to find that potential, because it's not just going to naturally manifest itself.
No, that's an excellent point, Nick. Thank you. Bryson or Roy or Devin, sorry. We're coming up on the 1 hour marker. I know since Governor's School was virtual this year, It was a very unique experience, and a lot of our panelists are attendees, and we are live on Facebook, and I'm seeing some comments on there as well. A lot of the questions are from our attendees are, what are some good tips or strategies that we can use to teach virtually to make sure that we're reaching students, especially right now in the on-site online blend? I mean, a lot of us are taxed. Do you have strategies or tips that you can give us that work really well at governor's school, or that would help you right now? You're in your senior year, or like Roy in your senior year at college. I'll throw that out there. I think that's probably the last question we have.
So I am fully virtual right now, and my school is split up. We have students who are going 2 days a week. We have students who are going 4 days a week. We have students that are going 5 days a week, and we have students who are completely virtual. And then we have a whole other school system that's completely virtual. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of options. And so teachers have to adapt to a lot right now, which I want to open with this. Any issue that and a lot of the bigger issues that I'm having virtually, I don't really blame my teachers that much, because I know that there are so many obstacles right now that y'all are having to face. And you just don't have the resources, because you just don't, and it's not really y'all's fault. But the things that have worked for me really well virtually, teachers who, if they don't want to do Zoom calls, video lectures, actually being able to hear your teacher talk to you, I think is really, really nice. And it's just having that auditory input for a lot of students is really helpful. I have some teachers who do Zoom classes, and they'll have students in person and then also students on a Zoom call. And one of the things that I think I've found has worked best, if you want to have a live call and you have students virtually and in person, is to have every single student get on the call, which sounds a little crazy, but having every single student get onto the Zoom call, and all of the in-person students can mute themselves, mute their sound from their laptop if they have one. That's the other thing. My school district has laptops for every student. So if that's not a possibility, it's not. But they'll have all of the in-person students also join the Zoom and unmute themselves whenever they talk, so that everyone can participate in class discussions, and everyone can hear what's going on. So that's been really helpful for me. And then there are a couple of websites that I've had teachers using. So Google Classroom, posting on Google Classroom, making sure that you're using the classwork tab and telling your students that it exists, and really organizing your coursework. Because if you're just going through the Google Classroom stream, you cannot tell when anything is due. You can't tell when it's assigned. Students have to hunt for every single thing if it's not organized in any way, which is really difficult on us, because then I don't know what to do. I don't know what to turn in, and then I'm turning stuff in late, and then it's hard to grade, and it's a mess. But making sure you're using the classwork tab, and organizing. I have teachers who do it by week, so all of the assignments for the week are under this one tab in the classwork section. So I know what I have to do that week, and I know what's expected of me. That's really helpful. There's also a video site called Edpuzzle, I think, that allows you to put in a video and do questions along the video, that I've had some teachers use. And I don't love it, but I think it's a good way to share videos with students and make sure that they're watching them. I just don't like that I can't speed it up to like ×2 speed. But I think it's a good way to communicate information and make sure that students are still learning. And honestly, I've had a lot of teachers who do like required Zooms, and I know that a lot of students don't like that. I personally like attending Zoom calls, and I like being very present and in the moment and live, but for some students, I don't think that's really an option or something they really feel comfortable with. Some of them can't get on. They have like siblings to teach, siblings to help, and if they're doing all virtual, they're doing their work at night and they're still getting everything done. And so I think honestly requiring Zoom calls isn't necessary, and I think it will hinder some students in classes. As long as someone is getting their work done and learning, I think that's the goal. That's all I have to say, which is a lot. But
That's helpful.
I have a lot of thoughts on virtual stuff, and I want it to be good because I want a good education, and I want to make sure that teachers know what students need, because there's not a way to get that sometimes.
I think an important thing with virtual learning is teachers just being aware of the different dynamics that you're going to have in an online learning environment at home than you are going to have in a classroom setting. Like, for example, like what Devin was saying with the required Zoom calls, I don't think that's really a realistic thing. That puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and a lot of people's grades are going to start slipping if that happens, because you just have other responsibilities at home. You might have to take care of a sibling. I know a lot of kids in my class, they're working 40-hour weeks while still doing full-time school because virtual school just allows that, and they need the money somehow. So I think teachers, I would just advise you to check up with all of your students and just get a grasp on the certain dynamics that they have to deal with at their own home, and you just really have to be patient with this. This is a difficult time for teachers. This is a difficult time for students. And I just think just be more passionate, be more forgiving. And if a student turns in an assignment late, don't fail them. Just try to understand the different factors that went into why this assignment was turned in late. So yeah, I just definitely just urge all teachers, just check up with other students. Also, just in general, like weekly checkups, certain things that did wonders for me, because last year we went completely online, and some of my teachers, they would only do Google Classroom, and they would just post assignments and be like, all right, do this worksheet. This is your assignments for the week. But I had a pre-cal teacher who she would have just office hour type situations where we could come and meet with her. We could just talk to her, and it honestly just eased so much pressure off of me, because she just made me feel comforted. She made me realize that this isn't just a struggle that I'm going through. This is something that's happening to us in our entire community, in our entire nation, globally. We're all struggling. We're trying to figure out how to navigate this pandemic. So just be more compassionate towards your students is my advice in virtual learning.
Thanks.
And also, I offer limited advice in this realm because we're on campus, because we stay away from home. And for our classes, we do have hybrid classes. And so one of the main things I can say is be positive. I know our teachers aren't like really super energetic and happy, but like interacting with kids online, personally by name, and making them feel as if they're a part of the class, like normalizing it as much as possible. That's really crucial. I know my French teacher is this jazzy little man from Kansas, and he makes class so fun, and because that's what he does in person, but he also to rope in our kids online and make them feel like they're here, because it's the best we can do in this situation, is to stay positive, and also you just interact with each other as much as possible face to face, because we have Promethean boards that we Zoom through, and so if students are out, that they can see us and we can see them, and that's been really good for my friends that are online. But this is a very difficult time for teachers. I know teachers are having to deal with technology they didn't have to before, and more. And so it's really easy to just get down on yourself or not want to put forth the effort that you want to, but just do your best. And I think that everyone at this point has their amount of empathy has gone up. So there's a mutual understanding between teachers and students that this is going to be rough until we can get it under control. So just do the best you can.
Yeah, I think one thing that Bryson touched on, the like making students feel like they're a part of the class. If you're going to have a Zoom call, having your virtual students feel like they're ghosts in the room is pretty sucky. Because I've felt like that in some of my Zoom calls. My teacher will put the start the call, and then she'll walk away and turn her camera off, and she's speaking through a mask, and I can't really hear what she's saying, and I can't hear what any of the students are saying. So I'm there, but I'm not really doing anything there. I'm just on a call. And so making sure that your virtual students are able to engage in the same way that your in-person students are, if you're going to have them participate live, making sure that that is actually participating is really important, because otherwise people aren't going to show up and they're just going to not care.
Yeah, thanks, Bryson. Thanks, Devin. Roy, did you have anything you want to add?
I think all I would say is, in some ways, as kind of non-intuitive as it might sound, I think that the key right now is to give up a little bit in a very specific way. And that I think it's very important for teachers and for students to let yourself off the hook and understand right now that whatever you try to do, you will be unable to recreate a traditional year in school. It's an impossibility at this point. But I think that's a wonderful opportunity, because it gives you a blank slate to build on. And so I think in some ways the worst online classes I've had are the ones that kind of most might mimic a traditional experience, because you can only get kind of a poor half copy, because it's not possible to really recreate that experience. But I think the best ones I have are the ones where the teacher, the professor, has really started from a new place and said, this is the situation, this is given, it sucks, it's terrible, but here we are. Now what can I do? And I think when you accept the reality that, like, this isn't going to be what it was, but maybe it can be something else that in some ways could be even better, and that we're going to make the best of it that we can. And I think that allows you as teachers to not feel, some of that guilt and some of that pressure to create kind of the exact educational opportunity, because the best teacher in the world couldn't do that. But what you can do is the best that you can, and I'm sure that every teacher out there is doing exactly that.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Roy.
Y'all are all doing your best. And I think that, at least for my school district, I think that there should have been more prep on administrative side and like helping teachers figure out what to do. Because all of the teachers I've talked to have been like, we have no idea what's going on. We don't know what's happening. We don't know how to use any of this technology. We've been given no resources. We have to pay for a lot of this stuff on our own. I don't know how to make, they don't know how to make this okay at all, and they've been given no resources. So like if school districts could talk to their teachers, hold some sort of seminar for like doing stuff on Zoom, for operating all of these technology things that teachers have never had to do all at once, I think that needs to happen if it can.
Yeah, kudos to the teachers that have really taken the initiative and that are still doing their best. Roy said something about guilt. I know I've talked to I've always been tried to be close to my teachers. And I know there's always kind of a thin layer of guilt as it is because of the way the system is, and teachers aren't able to do some things and some resources aren't available. And so it's really easy right now to definitely feel guilty and feel like you dropped the ball or something, but it's really, it's an administrative issue. It's a funding issue. What teachers are doing right now is, what we need them to do. And they've always been rocks and, underpaid, mistreated, whatever, teachers stick through it for us. And that it warms my heart and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like we can get through this because teachers do care.
That's awesome. Thanks, Bryson. This obviously hasn't been easy on any of us. And I think I can speak for the entire gifted and talented community and all of the teaching profession that y'all give us hope. Y'all have given us very insightful, thoughtful responses tonight. We didn't answer everything, and I apologize for those that are on Facebook and those in the chat. We didn't get to all of the questions, but I didn't want to interrupt the conversations that y'all were starting. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Devin, thank you for helping me arrange this. I wish y'all the best of luck during your senior year. We know that, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I feel more confident now about the future than ever, knowing that y'all are the future of Arkansas. So thank y'all for joining us today. and we will get through this. So thank y'all very much. For those that didn't get to see this, we will have this recorded on our website, giftedarkansas.org. Thank you for joining us for our webinar on Gifted in Arkansas, a Student Panel Perspective. That's it for now. Thank y'all very much.